Interesting topics today, from stalking to coercion to infidelity and Jersey guys we had on the phone.
Hey.
Now we got a real Mohawk Valley guy, Scott McNamara, the Oneida County DA. Scott, welcome to the show.
Welcome, or thank you. Good morning, Dave. How are you today?
Doing great. Let's see, we were talking a little bit before we went on there about your background, having grown up on an iconic site, the AKJ Farms in Deansboro there, where we used to hold an occasional concert at my previous radio station.
Yes, I lived there from when I was in second grade to sixth grade, and then my parents bought a farm that's just above that, and my mom still lives there.
Right.
Just a good old farm boy, huh?
That's right.
Did you bale hay and scoop out stuff and all that kind of business?
I baled a lot of hay as a kid. Yes, I did.
How does a guy like that make it from that kind of atmosphere all the way to DA?
Luck. A lot of it was luck. Plus, that hard work reminds you of how much easier life is when you do something like I do now. So.
How much you do not want to be in a barn unloading, 15 to 18 things of hay each day.
Keeps you motivated.
It's a very warm job, and then milking cows is not a lot of fun, especially when,
It's interesting. I've talked about this with the sheriff before, and a lot of people may not understand, but baling hay is hot. And it's a tough job.
Sure.
You can't do it alone. But you need to wear long-sleeve clothing on long pants, because if you walk out of there, oh, gosh, you look like you've just fought a cat. And it's one of the most annoying things ever, because it continues to itch. You'd rather have chicken pox.
A lot of people with an itch to scratch here locally. Are you surprised at the number of folks locally that have Ashley Madison accounts?
When I heard the numbers when I was driving in, when you're listening to you guys, I guess I'm surprised. I don't know.
Yeah.
I don't know that much about it. It's which I was kind of surprised when I heard you guys talking, because are there women? Because it doesn't make sense. Why it's just the men?
My thought exactly.
I think it is mostly designed for single women to hook up with married or committed guys.
Oh, okay.
So, but again, it takes two to tango. It takes the guy to seek the woman, but then it takes the woman to be on there seeking that to be. And I don't know what the appeal is for a woman to be with that type of a guy either. I just don't get it.
That's the thing that made me wonder. And then I was wondering, probably the DA in me, is it a prostitution type of situation? So
Sure, those are all good thoughts. And being in your position, do you see that? Do you see that often?
You know what we see on those type of sites more than anything is it's a scam where they're getting your credit card and then it's being illegally used.
Okay.
And in a weird way, a lot of times people would then be afraid to come forward because of the way in which they got the credit card number.
Right.
How much are you forced now to monitor activity online as opposed to in person in your job?
Well, we don't really monitor anything online like this type of stuff, but what we deal with a lot is the economic type of crime that comes about, and that's the problem with a lot of these sites is once you're giving your credit card number up, you don't know who you're giving it to and whether it's a legitimate business. And something like this, you don't know what they're going to do with your credit card number. Now, it appears to be a legitimate business. I don't know what little I've read. I guess the person that is actually trying to out them or whatever is mad about a $20 fee that they got. So, I don't know. So it seems to be that they weren't misusing the credit card information after they got it. So.
Scott McNamara, the DA from Oneida County, joining us on the Talk of the Town show. Now, the arrest of Frank Talarino, interesting on a number of fronts, stalking and coercion. Do we have any more details on that case at the moment?
Actually, I don't know that much about the case because it took place in Madison County. So that's my good friend Bill Gaber out in Madison County.
And mine too.
And I know he was arrested here in Oneida County. I was aware that there was an investigation going on, but because it didn't involve any crime that was actually taking place here in Oneida County, I didn't get involved.
Will it impact previous crimes that he was implicated in?
No, not really, because the only other thing that we had pending against Frank a while ago was a harassment case, and that case was actually adjourned in contemplation of dismissal, which to the listeners, basically what it means is it was adjourned for 6 months, and if he doesn't get in trouble in that 6 months, and it ultimately be dismissed. Part of that disposition was that the victim in that case, who was another legislator, received an order of protection where Mr. Taylor, was basically directed by the court not to have any contact with her. It's called a stay-away order,
which is
order of protection.
Maybe kind of tough in their situation, both being in Democrats and
in the same caucus, or
yes.
at least in the same section. But that case was, because I was listening yesterday, and I know that you were talking about it. That case was resolved, though, and in a way, in Frank's favor. And the problem with that case that we saw was it was very high. To win that case at trial, we would have had to prove that Frank's intent was to harass, annoy, or alarm Harmony, and it really wasn't. That wasn't exactly what was going on. There was a pushing contest going on about whether or not someone could go into a certain room
in the caucus. During the caucus.
And as juvenile as that is, it still doesn't necessarily help us prove one of the elements of the crime. So that's what took place in that case.
You mentioned the 6-month time frame, though, with Frank, not being able to get in more trouble, and those charges would stick. Would this case here?
Technically, we could open it back up, but it still doesn't undo the problem we had initially, which is we had basically a problem proving one element of the. In this case, it was a violation, not a crime.
Now, when it comes to stalking and coercion in general, you've dealt with other cases like this, I assume.
Yes.
And where's the line between a healthy interest in somebody and then you become a stalker or somebody who coerces somebody else?
That's a good question. The stalking, what really pushes stalking over the line from just, interest in somebody is if what you're doing puts the person in a reasonable fear for their safety or for their welfare, or your behavior is such that you are causing that person emotional harm. So, most of us know, there's a difference between you call somebody up a few times and you're not getting the answer you want, so you keep it up, and, that doesn't rise to the level. And also with stalking, typically there is some point in time where the person says, you got to knock this off. You got to leave me alone.
Sure.
That's kind of a huge triggering point for us. And coercion's a little bit different. Coercion is most people understand the term blackmail because we've kind of all heard that. And coercion's kind of in that family. And within the blackmail family, you have what we call in the legal field, we call extortion. And extortion is a larceny type of crime where somebody basically threatens somebody to get money.
Financial gain.
Financial.
Sure.
So that's an extortion. A coercion is the same principle, but you're not trying to get money from the person. You're trying to get the person either to act or to refrain from acting. So a lot of times when we see coercion cases, it typically involves domestic incidents where a charge has been filed, and the defendant, who's typically male, will then call the victim and threaten them to either that they're going to beat them up, they're going to kill them, they're going to do something, they're going to destroy their property, they're going to whatever, if they don't come down to the DA's office and drop charges.
Gotcha.
That's our typical coercion. So there's a lot of different behavior, though, that can fall under coercion, and so it's a very broad type of crime.
Yeah, we had a friend of ours, a female friend, who had a relationship briefly with somebody. The relationship was broken off by her, but then she actually was on a cell phone one night, and he was out in her yard walking around, which obviously would clearly be a case of stalking, I guess.
Absolutely.
Have you run across other cases of that in
Oh,
in your work?
absolutely,
Yeah.
absolutely. We see.
And what does somebody do in a circumstance? What do you suggest that the victim would do in that case?
We always tell the victim the most important thing the victim can do for us in the long term is document everything, because with stalking we have to prove a course of conduct. And so a lot of times what will happen is the victim will, it's usually one event that, as the saying goes, the straw that broke the camel's back.
Right.
And that will be the thing that the victim is concentrating on. But for our purposes, we need a course of conduct. So when the person is being stalked, to keep track of all the little things that might not necessarily, be the scary thing where the person is, in your backyard in the middle of the night, looking in your window, but all the other things they did, because that's going to help us prove the course of conduct, and also that it's reasonable that the person is in fear for their, for their safety, either in their person or their property.
Scott, with the experience in these cases with yourself, do you find that typically the folks know each other in a lot of these situations?
Usually they know each other, or there was some meeting in at some point. But it's typical. It's where we see stalking a lot is there's a breakup, and,
right.
And it doesn't have to be a long-term relationship. It might be a 1 or 2 date, and then the female. It's typically the female that will then say, "Hey, listen, I'm not interested in the male." Mm-hmm. It's funny because probably the most famous movie that we all know is backwards, Fatal Attraction. But,
right.
That's very common.
Stuff. Hollywood movie.
Yes.
Yeah. And with that, Scott, I know Dave brought up a point. Social media, is that becoming more of a situation of where you're seeing these cases?
Yeah, and it's social media and the things that go on with social media, like creating different web pages, and people can really harass people pretty bad on social media. Topics is a notorious thing that we've investigated a lot of times. But and the problem with social media and all media is the First Amendment kicks in, and that's where it becomes very muddy for us, because someone will be clearly being harassed, but if we've had cases where some of the people are, either public figures or they're people like yourselves who are private people and not necessarily in a government job, but you're very public people. So you kind of have a diminished expectation of privacy because of that. And someone will write something about them, and they'll that's ridiculous. I want something done. And we're like, well, you're kind of out there, and they have the right to put their opinion out there. And a lot of times it is opinion where people, say, people say things about me. I don't know what I'm doing. I'd be better off back on the farm. All those things. Those are opinions, and what are you going to do with it? But sometimes it does cross a line, and the threats is what we really look at.
Topics is a forum, by the way, where you do have some recourse if things are being said that are untrue. I know you can apply to them and have them remove comments, and they usually comply with that as well. Also, with regard to our own personal experiences with this, back in the late 90s when I was at another radio station, I had someone threaten my son online with a comment, and the FBI interceded at that point. I know they had to bust the guy, and I don't know what the outcome of that was, but you've always got recourse in situations like this. Scott, thanks for joining us. Lastly, with regard to Frank Tallarino, is he in trouble over this? I mean, if it happened in your jurisdiction, would you think this would cause a problem?
My understanding of the law as it pertains to the legislators, it's not. Even if he was convicted, it won't automatically make him be removed from the board. As an elected official, as I am, I guess I would have to wonder how it's going to affect. I'm pretty sure he's up for election this year, so I'm wondering how it will affect that election. So, but only time will tell.
Hey, Scott, thanks for joining us. Great to see you again.
Thanks for having me.
Hope to have you in again. It's
right.
Scott McNamara, the DA from Oneida County, and coming up next on the Talk of the Town, 100.7 FM WUTQ, our news block, and in the sports, a college football coach is in trouble for a very bizarre reason. Stick with us.